Lieutenant? What is it?
My God. Baze, give me a line to the Colonel.
3 a.m., sir.
I don't care what time it is. This one's waited long enough.
Hello again, Cardinal fans. I apologize for my absence. I was busy trying to develop a sunscreen strong enough to protect Brad Thompson from the sun. Needless to say, it's not looking good for Brad. Today I want to talk about an article that was written by a man named Dane over at Redbird Rants. Quick disclaimer, Redbird Rants is a publication I have a tremendous amount of respect for, even though I disagree with them regularly. They are true professionals that have always made great cases for their arguments and are always open to opposing ideas. Dane's article, on the other hand, meets none of those standards. I'll get into the specifics in just a second, but first I need to point out a few things. Dane's arguments can be broken up into the following categories: keeping Stephen Piscotty instead of trading for Marcell Ozuna, trading for Christian Yelich instead of Ozuna, trading for Bryce Harper, Dexter Fowler, lack of good signings and trades, and finally, firing John Mozeliak. Let's begin. Stephen Piscotty over Marcell Ozuna. The article's first argument is that the Cardinals would have been better off if they kept Stephen Piscotty instead of trading for Marcell Ozuna. He compares their stats from last season, and he's correct in the fact that they put up similar numbers. Dane also acknowledges that the reason that he was traded to Oakland, 30 minutes from his hometown, is so he could be with his mother in her final days. Keep in mind, this trade came at Piscotty's request. Dane's complaint, even though he understands this, is that the Cardinals didn't add any value to the team. I'm sure no one, including Dane, felt this way at the time of the transaction. And he's completely overlooking the fact that they wouldn't have Jairo Munoz or Max Schrock if it weren't for the Piscotty trade. You know, the middle infield depth they were lacking. And he even goes as far as saying that we were deceived by the front office's praise for Ozuna, which I don't think we were. Everyone knew full well that Ozuna had only put together that stellar of a season once. And when you compare their numbers from 2017, Ozuna was an improvement over Piscotty. Christian Yelich over Marcell Ozuna. Dane brings up that the Cardinals had the opportunity to trade for Yelich. It's easy to say that they made the wrong choice a year later, but let's go ahead and break this one down anyway. Ozuna's stats in 2017 made him the obvious betting favorite when compared to Yelich. However, if you look at their career numbers at the time, Yelich was clearly the more consistent hitter despite lacking the power and run production Ozuna would provide. You could chalk this decision up to recency bias, but we should note that the Cardinals were looking for a power bat rather than an ideal number 2 hitter. With all of that in consideration, there would have been a collective groan throughout St. Louis if the Cards picked up Yelich instead of Ozuna. There's just one catch. According to Mozeliak, Yelich wasn't even on the table until after the Marlins moved Ozuna. And I believe him. Yelich was only 26 years old when he was traded to Milwaukee, with 4 years and just over $43 million left on his contract, which is about $11 million a year. He also has a team option in 2022 should the Brewers want to extend him. If the Marlins were rebuilding, why would they get rid of a cornerstone player like Yelich when he's locked down to a relatively cheap contract for the next 4 to 5 years? And we should also look at the lineup expectations the Cardinals had last offseason. Matt Carpenter was going to lead off and play third base. Dexter Fowler was going to play right and bat second. Tommy Pham was supposed to play center field, hit 30 home runs, steal 30 bases, and make an MVP run. Ozuna would fill the cleanup spot and play left field. Yadier Molina was the everyday catcher. Shortstop Paul DeJong was coming off a 25 home run rookie season despite missing the first month and a half. Colton Wong was going to continue to be a vacuum at second base while trying to get his bat working. And Jose Martinez was going to take over first base with hopes that he could maintain his solid batting average. If you replace Ozuna in that lineup with Yelich, you have 4 number 2 hitters and no promising power. It's so convenient to look at these things in hindsight, but Ozuna filled a need. And he really didn't do as bad of a job filling that need as Dane leads on. Ozuna's performance was similar to Matt Holliday's during his time with St. Louis. Trading for Bryce Harper. It's brought up that the Cardinals had the opportunity to trade for Bryce Harper last year. I have 2 questions. When and why? Washington, like a majority of the National League, were still in the playoff race well past the non-waiver trade deadline. So if the Nationals wanted to trade Harper, he would have had to make it through revocable waivers, which they apparently tried doing. He was reportedly put on waivers, and the Dodgers, who were ahead of the Cardinals on the list, claimed him. No deal was reached, the Nats pulled Harper back off waivers, and they weren't allowed to put him on again for the rest of the season. And even if they were, what's stopping the Dodgers from claiming him again to keep him away from the other teams they were competing with for a playoff spot? Like St. Louis. Addressing the why question, the Cardinals would have had to give up an uncomfortable amount of talent for Harper, and there's no guarantee that they would have been able to re-sign him. A lot like Manny Machado and the Dodgers. Who would you be willing to give up to have Harper for 2 months? Alex Reyes? Jordan Hicks? Tyler O'Neill? Possibly all three? Even if they had the opportunity to trade for him before the 2018 campaign started, he was going to be a free agent at the end of the season. And let's not forget that the Nationals believed that they were going to be able to keep him. Dexter Fowler. Dane voices his displeasure in the front office's decision to invest in Dexter Fowler during last year's playoff race instead of trading for another outfielder, which in hindsight may not have been the best choice, but let's look at the scenario through their eyes. Fowler, Carpenter, and Wong got off to abysmal starts in 2018. Hart bounced back and made himself an MVP candidate. Wong caught fire in the second half of the season, so why wouldn't Fowler be able to break the slump? And just in case he didn't, they had Jose Martinez and Tyler O'Neill that could take his spot. Lack of good signings and trades. According to Dane, the Cards haven't made many signings or trades worth praise since Mozeliak took over. And for the most part, I agree. We both make exceptions for Carlos Beltran, Matt Holliday, and Lance Berkman, just to name a few, but his stance on what qualifies as a good acquisition is puzzling. He says that trading for Martinez was the only good move the Cards have made in the past 3 years. The only one. No one else. Just that one. Some examples that he feels were bad are Greg Holland, Jake Westbrook, and Jason Hayward. Greg Holland, at the time, was one of the most dominant closers in baseball. This was not a bad signing. Just because he didn't perform well doesn't mean it's Mozeliak's fault. Jake Westbrook was acquired to eat a bunch of innings as a back-end starter in a rotation that consisted of Adam Wainwright, Chris Carpenter, Jaime Garcia, and Kyle Loesch, which he did. Quite well. They even won a World Series with him. And Jason Hayward's season with the Cardinals was his best since his rookie year. He ended 2015 with a career high in batting average, hits, stolen bases, doubles, MVP votes, and went home with this third Gold Glove. If Hayward didn't work out for anyone, it's the Cubs. They did have to give up Shelby Miller in order to get Hayward. And Miller did have a great year after the trade. But much like Hayward, that was it. His career took a nosedive afterward. To wrap up this point, just because a player didn't perform to your expectations during their time in St. Louis does not mean it was a bad signing. Khalil Green and Brandon Moss were really bad though. Which brings us to the final category, firing John Mozeliak. Dane feels Mozeliak should be ousted for several reasons. First reason, he's not willing to spend money on players. I do not enjoy how frugal the Cardinals front office is, but if the DeWitts had any issue with the lack of spending, there would be a new GM. Which tells me, now stay with me, the owners are the ones setting the budget. So if anyone's to blame for the lack of big signings, it's the ownership. But Mozeliak will never come out and say that. When you're in a leadership position, you don't blame others for failure, especially your superiors. By the way, Mozeliak has flat out said his number one priority is to make the DeWitts money. Dane is also upset that Mozeliak succeeded Walt Jocketty as the Cardinals GM, which isn't his fault. He did not appoint himself to that position. Jocketty, for those who don't remember, was the GM back when the Cardinals had the MV3, Albert Pujols, Jim Edmonds, and Scott Rowland. Dane also points out, and I can't say that he's wrong, Mozeliak isn't great at recognizing talent. For this reason, he brings up Jeff Luhnow as someone who would have been a better successor to Jocketty. He can give credit to Luhnow for Houston's success all he wants, but let's not pretend tanking didn't play a big part in that. I'm positive Mozeliak could win another World Series after 3 consecutive 100-loss seasons in order to draft prospects out of the number 1 spot. So unless he's proposing the Cardinals tank, let's chill out on praising the Astros. It was not a fun journey for the fans. Dane's previous articles seem more upbeat and thought out for the most part. And since this was his first article written since opening day, it's safe to assume he was just upset with the Cardinals' overall performance that week. This article was written mostly on the back of emotion. While some valid points were made, he discredited himself by hurling insults, showing deep ingratitude, and failing to recognize his arguments were made in hindsight. Now, I'm not hoping to create any backlash towards Dane, nor am I trying to make any enemies. I only want to show Dane that using his platform in an unprofessional manner reflects poorly on the entire Cardinal fan base. And please, stop making me defend John Mozeliak. Thank you all again for watching, and forget Christian Yelich. If y'all made it this far into the video, you the real MVP. But don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. I apologize again for my 2-month hiatus, but if Brad needs my help, I can't say no. I will be uploading more frequently in the coming weeks, and I cannot wait to hear your feedback. Until next time, go Cards!